meeting. This is Tuesday, September 22nd. This is the regular board meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 8th, 2015 regular meeting?
So moved.
By Deirdre.
Second.
By Lisa. Any discussion or changes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. I'm happy to see that we have a number of members of the public here. I believe Mr. Phelan has a few words to say about our transportation issues that we've been having.
Okay, so Mark had asked me a couple of days ago to give a little bit of an overview. Some of this you've read in the items that I've been sending home, but I thought I'd recap it here, essentially to give everybody some background on the contractual issues regarding where we're at right now. Tom, you can jump in at any time. Tom was the point person on our contract with our prior transportation vendor. And my understanding from Tom in terms of the specific dates was that he was informed on April 9th, 2015 by our former transportation vendor that they were planning on terminating their contract with the district. We'd had a contract with that company for quite a few years.
Yeah.
5 years, 6 years, maybe.
Even going back, it used to be A&E, which was purchased by Durham a few years ago.
So they informed us on April 9th that they were planning to terminate their contract with the district. There are two other school districts in the county that at the time also had a contract with that particular vendor. Those districts would be the Spack-and-Kill Central School District and the Dutchess County BOCES. And the three districts got together and started planning for a new bid process. We spoke with our legal counsel and were advised that due to a public bidding situation, we could not renegotiate the contract, that we would have to go out and redo the bid process. So we started planning that with Spack-and-Kill and with Dutchess County BOCES. On May 29th, we received notice in writing from Durham Transportation Services that they were in fact terminating the contract. I would point out to the board and the members of the public that normally if a public entity like a school district is looking to put their transportation program out to bid, which districts do from time to time for any number of reasons, that typically occurs in the middle of winter, January, say, so that the bid process can be followed, that the board can award a bid, and then the successful bidder has counted up March, April, May, June, July, August, about 6 months to gear up for the start of the school year. So given the timeline, in this case, we went out to bid with the other two districts. The bids were opened, I think, in late June.
Very late June.
Again, which is not that long a period of time from late May to late June. Bids were opened in late June. This Board of Education met next at their first meeting in July, which was, I think, July 14th, if I'm not mistaken, and at that point awarded the bid to Always East. According to the public bidding laws, school district or other public entity is required to award the bid to the lowest responsible bidder. That's not an option, that's the law, to the lowest responsible bidder. The 3 school districts, Mr. Brunel and the officials from Spackenkill and BOCES reviewed the bids. Do you recall how many bids we received?
There was 4 bidders.
4 bidders, including Always East?
Yes.
Okay, and awarded the bid to the lowest bidder, which was Always East. Spackenkill and Duchess BOCES did the same, although none of the districts, they were, under the bidding law, required to also award the bid to the lowest responsible bidder. So with our board approving that bid on July 14th, that gave the successful bidder about 7 weeks to gear up for the start of the school year. I think at the very least, the short notice, which was totally out of our control, is part of the reason why we started the school year off without being as up to speed as we would be in a perfect situation where they would have at least 6 months to do that. It would be pure speculation to say that the same situation or type of situation might not have happened with any of the other bidders had they been the low bidder. Again, 7 weeks to turn around a bus contract and implement it is a very short cycle. Again, when we get notice, verbal notice in early April and written notice in late May, we moved as quickly as we could to get that process to happen. So that's the background on where we're at today with our current contract. In terms of where we're at, it's no secret to anybody in this room that the contract had a rocky start. Our program had a rocky start. We experienced problems from day one, and it may be cold comfort to some, but those of us who've been following this very, very carefully have seen improvements over the last couple of weeks. Not 100% satisfactory, but getting there. We started off with the first week where many of the runs weren't being run on time. We're down to all of our runs arriving here on time, which means they leave for Chancellor on time, which means they have the opportunity to make their second run after the middle school, high school run, and pick up the Chancellor students, and then the same process occurs in the afternoon. We've seen, at least since last Thursday, Friday, then Monday and today, that our buses are running on time, except with a few exceptions, and those exceptions turn out to be on individual runs where the driver's not able to be there because of illness or some other reason, and a substitute has to drive the run, or the runs have to be combined, and then that results in some problems for us. But those problems have been less and less each day since at least the middle of last week. A number of other things have happened to improve the service. When the program started on September 9th, the buses were not equipped with bus radios. By early to mid last week, each bus had a handheld bus radio. We have the capacity here in our district to connect with those bus radios with the radios that we use within our school district for contacting maintenance personnel, etc. So we're on their channel. We can talk to them, ask them if they have an issue. They can call us. We can hear the conversations with their dispatch, and that communication capability has been something very, very positive. We were informed today, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, that Always East is in the process of hiring several new drivers. That's been a big problem up to this point. It's not only a problem for Always East. The private bus companies in this region of the state, including our former transportation company, have had a notoriously difficult time hiring drivers, period. During the course of the last couple of weeks, we made inquiries to other bus companies to see if they might have drivers and buses to help us out short term, to take some of the load off Always East while they hired more drivers. And to a bus company, they all told us, we have buses, but we don't have drivers. So it's not a new problem. It's not a problem with Always East. It's a problem, in my opinion, with private transportation companies in this area. If I didn't mention it, we had similar problems on and off with Durham. They are not able to attract enough drivers to meet the need. So we wind up limping through when a driver is sick with a substitute driver who doesn't know the route or doesn't know the route well, and obviously that's not an optimal situation. I will also want to state that a good number of the Always East drivers who are working right now and servicing Rhinebeck are former Durham drivers. They are excellent drivers. They know the district. They know what they're doing. They're doing a good job. Those are the routes that we're not having problems on. The routes that we are having problems on are the routes where, because Always East is not able to hire enough permanent drivers, they're assigning substitutes. Somebody has to drive that bus, obviously. They're assigning substitutes to those routes, and the substitutes don't know the routes. So that's where our problems have primarily been based on. So I just wanted to kind of lay that history out on the table. Tom, I don't know if you would address the issue of routing.
Yeah, certainly. When this came to light as the possibility that Durham was going to leave us, though we did not get official word until May 29th, before then, it was always the possibility that they were going to continue on with it. So we did have to wait for their official letter. But one of the things that did occur during that time was the budget process had already been laid to rest. It was already in place.
The school budget process.
The school budget process, it was done. The thinking I had at that time was that we had, first of all, we had the early morning start time. I had already contracted with a consultant to work on possible routes for early start time and how that would work. So what then happened was that with the budget being at rest, my first thought was, no matter what, the cost of these buses are going to be more than what I have in the budget, and could be tremendously more. And we're very close as far as that's concerned. The finances are starting to get very tight in the school district with the tax cap. So my idea was, and had observed through the years, that the number of children that are on our buses are nowhere near optimal. And that is also for state aid. State aid purposes, we were not optimized. So the thought was to reroute, to do a couple things. To optimize our routing, to enable us to also get more state aid. So as we proceeded on, and the other thing too at that time was there was no way our budget could support a higher contract, which is what everybody thought was going to happen. So we would typically have 13 buses out here right now instead of 11. So that's what we currently had at that time, 13 routes. for the high school. So looking at the program, the consultant came in. I think he did a wonderful job and routed it, so we were able to get down to 11 routes in the high school. The routes themselves were completed early part of July, and they were available for Always East. We did send them to them mid-August when they requested them. So they received them, and we were in contact with them a few times to say, how are the routes? Do they look good? We were assured that they were good. Well, we found out that Wednesday morning that was not the truth. And so we have been going through routing. We've been making some changes. Actually, I'm meeting with some of them tomorrow to go over some other routes. Some of the routes are running perfectly well. But there are a couple trouble ones, which Joe has mentioned with the substitutes. They haven't been run properly consistently, so we can't tell where the issues are on those routes, but the other routes have, and there are going to be some minor tweaks that will be coming out. Some of the buses are getting here about 7:25 in the morning. That's cutting it too close. Don't want them to miss first period at all. So some buses, a couple of them, need to come in here about 5 minutes earlier. Also just some requests from the bus drivers that they've requested for safer pickups, so making some changes for that. Plus also we are going to be, after they've run these routes a couple times, they realize because they were former, some of them are former Durham bus drivers, they came up with better ways how to be able to save some time on the road or an easier or safer way to pick up kids. So we've been going through that, and tomorrow we'll be finishing those changes. Not everybody will get a new update. Some routes are running just fine, but those that aren't will receive letters, possibly with new pickup times, or reiterate the pickup time. And those will be sent out on Thursday with implementation on Monday. But that's how we got to our routing. We're constantly manipulating it to make it work better based on recommendations from the bus drivers, and also receiving calls from parents to see how we can better route. But it's been tough, I'll tell you that. And but I do have to compliment the bus drivers. They've done really well with some what I call limited resources. I was just absolutely flabbergasted, and so were the other districts, when there was no radio contact. But that's not a problem of the bus drivers. That's the company itself. But they have all brand new equipment. All brand new equipment should be arriving. They told us Friday. I know they're trying to get everything through the Department of Transportation and registered, so understanding is buses are arriving, getting them through DOT and through getting them registered for the road does take a couple days. So we're hoping to start seeing new equipment arriving here within the next couple days, and hope by the end of next week a vast majority, or hopefully everything, will have been over to brand new buses. But it's so because of the short time frame, it takes at least 8 weeks to get a bus, and they only had a few weeks notice too, so they ordered them right away as soon as they could. So they were gearing up as quick as possible, but like in a lot of places, especially for buses, they don't even start building them until they get an order. So it's not like they're sitting on a lot and come down and pick them up. They have to be built, and it takes about 8 to 10 weeks to get a bus. And so so that's where we are with the equipment.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have already contacted Always East and told them that we would We were looking to add an additional run to the current runs that we have right now. There are a couple of roads out in the middle of the district that we feel, in terms of safety, especially when the winter gets here, we should be running that run with a small bus and not with a big bus. So we've already told Always East that we want to add a run and put a small bus on that particular route. That will, we are pretty sure that is going to take up some of the slack from some of the other routes that are nearby. The other problem with adding a route at this point is they don't have the drivers to add a route. You need a driver if you're going to add a route, obviously. We're looking at, with their hiring several new people, being able to cover the routes we have right now with permanent drivers. So if we add another route, they'll need to hire another permanent driver. As soon as they can put another permanent driver on their crew, then we'll be adding that additional route, which we think will be a safer situation and will take up a little bit of the slack on a couple of the other nearby routes. That's accurate, correct?
Yep.
So that's kind of an overview as to where we're at right now. And we continue to work with the company and with the drivers. Tom has met once with the drivers and is meeting again with some of them tomorrow. We've met, I think, at least 3 or 4 times with Always East management to bring our concerns to their attention and to ask them to address the problems we're having. So it's not like we're sitting back and letting it happen. We're doing everything we can do, short of buying our own buses and getting our own CDLs and attempting to drive them ourselves, which we're not able to. That's also one difference between Rhinebeck's transportation program and Spack and Kill's. Spack and Kill has a small fleet of small buses, and they employ a small crew of their own drivers. We do not. So they have backup drivers in case there's a substitute need. We don't have that luxury to be able to jump in ourselves and provide a substitute driver. So we have to depend on Always East to come up with substitutes when there is a need for one. And as I mentioned before, that has been a constant problem since the program started 8 or 9 days ago. No, I can't think of anything else. I think we've been over it, at least as far as the broad brush strokes are concerned.
Looks like Diane might have a question.
Diane?
Thank you for the overview, and I appreciate all the extra work the district office and the building principals and everyone's done through this. I do have a couple questions. I realize the bidding process was late, and that gave them a short amount of time. However, they did bid on this knowing what the requirements are, what the district needed. At any time during the bidding process or up until the first day of school, did they notify you that they didn't have enough time or that they wouldn't be prepared to honor, the contract?
I always got assurances that everything was going to be ready. Always got assurances.
Okay. My other question is, if you can maybe explain a little bit about the bidding process, do we interview the bus company? Do we have during that process, was there the opportunity to ask them questions? Having a shortage of drivers has been an issue for many years here. So if you could just explain the process a little.
Yeah, basically what happened was it might have been the last week of June when the bids were opened. And there was 4 companies that bid on it. First of all, 3 bid on the other 2. We had another vendor who just bid on us. Okay, so there was one who just bid for us, but not Spack and Kill and Duchess Bosse's, and then the other 3 vendors bid on all 3 of them. So as they were opened, and what we have to do is go to the lowest bidder. And we go to the lowest bidder, and BOCES conducted a background check of the company.
BOCES was the lead agency on
BOCES
this
was the
bid
lead
process.
agency. Yep.
Is that always the case at BOCES? Is it just in this case?
In this case, it was, just because they're the overarching entity in the county. In the previous, as you know, we went out the year before to do it with Spack and Kill. Spack and Kill was the lead at that time. But in this case, this was done by Duchess BOCES. They actually have a purchasing group, and were able to put together a RFP pretty quickly.
And there are bid specs that are created by, in this case, by Duchess BOCES.
Right.
Obviously, the participating districts, get to review that and have to approve that, but basically, any possible bidders are looking at the same set of bid specs. So you've got to bid apples to apples. Sometimes there are options within the bid specs, and I'm not sure that there were necessarily in this case. I know there have been in past bids, but basically they put bid specs out to whoever is interested in picking them up and submitting a bid. They're sealed bids, and you open them up, and they are what they are. But Diane's question was specifically about
Right.
interviewing
Right.
these companies.
So at the time of the bid opening, all we do at that time is actually open it up and read out the cost or what the bid quotes are for each of them. Nothing is negotiated at that table or anything, because you got all the vendors right there. So they leave, and what we do is we sit down, and in this case, BOCES went through the process to go through the references. We did internet checks on the company. They called various people, other business officials down in that area, who weren't on the reference list, because you go beyond just checking the references, because you don't put a reference in there unless you know it's good. So we contacted all the business they had with all the various districts and municipalities they worked with, because they already were in this area working for Dutchess County. They did the preschool program. They took over for Durham the year before. So they were already up in the county, but they were running smaller buses at the time for the preschool program. They also had a few districts down in Westchester, Yonkers. I'm trying to remember the other one. I can't remember, was Scarsdale or I can't remember, but there was a couple districts down there which were called, and they all got glowing reviews as far as that's concerned. From equipment, their maintenance record was, they got a 98. That's unheard of, a 98. Out of their Fishkill, they have two locations at the time. One was in Fishkill, and the other one's down in Yonkers. And the Fishkill facility had a 98 point, I think it was 98.1 or something like that, and that's truly unheard of. 90 is really good. But they were very high, and that was very encouraging. We met their staff. We went down there and met with them. The three school districts did go down and meet with them to discuss the individual school districts' needs, and at that time, we were assured that they would be up and ready for September. We knew that any company we were going to have the issue of hiring drivers. No one has, I think they had to hire 40 to 50 drivers altogether between Spack and Kill, ourselves, and Duchess BOCES. No matter what company was going to do it, they all had to hire the people. So it would have been the same as far as driver, soliciting drivers and getting drivers into their shop. It would have been the same for any one of the vendors. But at that time, they didn't think it would be an issue either at that time. But obviously it has been. And Joe mentioned with private carriers, it's gone beyond private carriers. Even our public schools in the area are having a real tough time finding bus drivers right now. It's huge shortage of them all around. And you never thought it would be in public schools due to the hourly rate and the benefits, but there's a couple school districts having very difficult times having all their buses and their spares and their substitute drivers. There's a lot of school districts having some real issues right now beyond us.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Rick?
Tom, I think somewhere in here you mentioned that several times they had assured you that they were all right on the routes.
Yes,
Was part of that assurance that somebody had actually driven those routes?
that's what we asked, and they said they had.
They said they had driven those routes.
Yes, and they may have, but the drivers had not. And I think that's the big difference. Someone could have run the routes, but the drivers who are going to run those routes, they never got a chance, is my understanding. And that's the part that gets me, because those are the people who are supposed to be doing those routes.
And that was your assumption?
Yes, I did. That was, you're right. I assumed that they had the actual drivers out there on the road looking at these routes.
All right, other questions? Okay.
I have one quick
I'm sorry.
one. So Tom, about the routes that were generated, can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Well, one of the biggest things when you take a look at routing is first of all, what is the capacity of the bus? For the high school, we put the capacity at 44. Even though they say there's 66 passengers, you're just not going to get three high school, middle school kids in a seat. So we wrote them as 44. And typically we cap them and say, because not everybody rides the bus either, so we assume that you can fill it a little bit more because not 100% of the kids are going to be driving in. So I think at the most, they routed like 55 or 56 students to the high school, middle school, knowing that
Per bus.
per bus. The other thing when you're trying to make an efficient route is to also at the same time try to maximize your state aid. And to do that, you got to remember that in New York State, we only get transportation aid for middle school and high school students that live 3 miles away or more. And for the elementary school, it's 2 miles or more. So any student within 3 miles for high school, middle school, and any student within 2 miles of an elementary school, you get no aid for those. So what you're trying to do is try to, like a spokes in the wheel, come from the outside and work your way in. Come from the outside, work your way in. So, because what you want to do is on a bus is you really want to have some of the people live more than 3 miles away, and then some who live less than 3 miles away. I mean, that's to be very efficient and to maximize state aid. Sometimes it's not always practicable, though, and so that's the big thing, too. So when they look at a bus, and we had a few buses also who only picked up within 2 or 3 miles, and so we were getting zilch for those. Nothing. It hurts your formula. So we were looking to more efficiently route them for kids to get to school, but also at the same time route them to get a better state aid figures for transportation. So it's it's not an easy thing when you're doing it on a computer versus actually being out there. That's why I was hoping for some feedback. But that's what you're trying to do. It's hard to just take a pocket sometimes and take this pocket and just go here. It's not how buses are routed in New York State due to the formula. And that's a bit of a concern. It doesn't matter. It's the grand total. But they have a very big thing. It's called can't remember what it's called, a pupil decimal worksheet that I got to do every few years, and I have to indicate on this bus how many people are there, how many people live within 3 miles, how many people live out, and they do their little magic to figure it out. And the last time we submitted it, I realized at that time we had some that were not going to generate any aid, while other ones did. But it's the best way for state aid. It's better to have half of them living outside 3 miles and the other half inside 3 miles, versus 100 outside and then 100 inside. That's not good at all. You want to get a mixture of both to do that correct, to maximize your aid. But that wasn't the reason for it. I mean, it was, while we're doing it, let's see what we can do to maximize. But that wasn't the initial intent. Initial intent was to reduce the number of runs, but, and also thinking that the rates for the buses were going to be beyond what the school district could pay. Luckily, what we did get actually is very helpful. So if we continue with this company, we can add buses and still be quite a bit under what we currently are paid in the past few years, because it's 2/3 the cost of what the previous bus supplier was. So, believe me, it wasn't for saving money. I just, at the time, thought it was going to go way over what we had budgeted, and we would have to start making massive cuts, and that would have been personnel.
I mean, Durham's termination of that contract caught us by surprise. We had, I think, at least another year plus on that contract, so we were not planning on having to go out to bid until at least the following year. So they put us in a position of really having to scramble at the last minute. Regardless of what the outcome of that was, that's the fact of how that played out.
All right, Diane has a question, and I'd like to get to the public comment.
Can you just talk a little bit about the week before school, when the notices went out to parents that had the time where their bus picked up, and parents started notifying the district that these times didn't make sense? Someone in Clinton, had a pickup time of 8:45, and school starts, at 8:50. Obviously, they can't get there in time. Can you just tell me what happened when school was notified that, some of the routes were clearly not going to work?
Unfortunately, we got totally overwhelmed and just couldn't keep up with it all. The calls just came too numerous, and there was no time to actually get it all corrected. And it was only a few. It wasn't everybody. It was a few that were really off. For the most part, they were right, but there were a few that just didn't make sense. But the problem came is that we just got inundated with phone calls and the likes. Just couldn't keep up with it all.
This was before school?
No, I know. Some did, and we tried to make corrections at that time. But I think that's something that if they had done the routes like they said they did, that's something that could have been caught very easily.
Was the bus company notified that week that some of these routes don't seem right? What happened when they ran them?
We started letting them know late that week, but at that time there was really not too much we could do, because to determine what the problem was and then make that correction and then get all the letters out, it would have been great if we would have been able to pull it off all at the same time, but it was just impossible. Everything started happening at once. So by the time those parents who did call, I think Sue was able to get more accurate times for them as to when it would be. But it's kind of hard to tell when you're not the actual bus driver and know exactly where that house is and how far you are away and what the rest of your route looks like. It's not an easy thing. I wish I could start all over again. Knowing what I know now, there was probably some steps I could have taken to ensure that I couldn't have changed the equipment part of it. I couldn't change the bus aspect equipment-wise, but we could have done a better handling of getting to know the routes. I even think I personally should have gone out and ran every route, and I have been starting to do some here and there, just to see how it is, especially places that there are concerns about safety. I've been looking at the situation and trying to see how we can reroute to make sure that they remain safe for pickup. But I mean, when you think about it, there's about 20 routes and then 20 home routes, because routes home sometimes are different than routes there. So it's a matter of doing that. I wish I could do that over again. I think that's probably what I would have done. I would have carved time out and doing at least one route a day just to go out there. I was hoping the bus company was going to do that with the actual drivers and give me back that information. But
And you had every indication that that's what they were going to do.
yeah, I had
so-
every indication that that's what they were going to do, but that is not what happened.
Okay, so we have an opportunity for public comment. Over to my left on the cart, there are blue agendas. In the agenda, there is the board policy number 1230, which is regard to rules of order at our meetings. If someone wishes to speak, I will recognize you and you can come to the mic. The microphone is more for the benefit of people who are watching on video later on. It's not really to amplify the sound for people in the room. I would ask that if you wish to speak, that you give your name and your address. Please address your remarks to me. I ask that you avoid comments of personal nature, in other words, about individuals or vendors. You will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes so that other people can have an opportunity. If you wish to speak later, you can speak again as long as everyone else has had a chance. And we'd like everyone to be able to speak without interruption. Thank you. Okay, so does anyone like to speak? Sir?
My name is Peter Rosenblatt, and I live at 5 Jones Street in Rhinecliff. And my daughter is Cyrus, and she's in middle school. And we, like many others, had a horrible first day of school and moderately improved days afterwards. And I appreciate the response that we've had, the very personal response from Tom. And here today, I think the tone of your response shows your care and your sensitivity. But we reacted a little bit differently, I suppose, than some other parents, because having experienced the labor action that took place a couple of years ago, we immediately thought, wow, this is interesting. A union company is no longer there. What happened? And it didn't take much effort for us to do due diligence to realize that the company that you contracted with, at the time you contracted with them, was subject to a labor action, a lawsuit, already because of their actions in regard with respect to Duchess. So all you have to do is go online and look under the National Labor Relations Board, and you'll see a series of filings and decisions in the action that was taken, which in my mind, and I'm trained as a lawyer, and I would assume that when one does due diligence, one looks and sees that if there are major labor actions against the company that you're about to contract with, maybe that's a red flag and the sort that should cause you to pause, and it gives you legal basis to be able to pause and to look into those other kinds of questions. So there was a labor action already because of the conduct of Always East in respect of Durham and their drivers. And we've tried to get more information. I'm sorry that I don't have all of it here tonight. But I can tell you that the National Labor Relations Board representatives in Albany really think this is an awful case. They think that there may be some collusion with the other boards that's gone on. There's apparently backstories to the fact that there was some effort to get around the union, to do something in terms of having non-union drivers. And so there's the possibility of some real ugly issues here. Some of you would also know, if you've talked to your lawyer, that there's been recent decisions by the National NLRB on the issue of joint employers. Now, what would happen if Rhinebeck School Board turns out to be treated as a joint employer that has been violating the labor rights of the workers here because they've been prevented from going through the kinds of card check that is normally allowed in this circumstance? The case is before the Court of Appeals right now in terms of the other case. And I could imagine theoretically, I mean, it wouldn't take much work for me to think through the kind of action that would be taken against this school district as well. because you have all the other conditions that might, apply to other joint employers. These are joint employer situations, as you probably read about in the newspaper. It's situations like McDonald's and others, where the National Labor Relations Board looks and says, hey, it's not just this franchisee, it's not just the people that you've outsourced to, this private company, you're the ones who are liable. Because you tell these drivers what to do. You have sufficient restrictions over what they do that you take the place of the employer. Now, I'm just putting this to you because I think it's important that this labor issue, which is huge, I mean, if you search Always East, that's what you come up with. And that was something that was known, it was on the record at the time that you went through the bidding process, and there are reasons to be concerned about it, and I would hope that this is something that you would be looking into. At the very least, whenever I hear, because of my professional work and my experience, when I hear labor shortage, what I think are labor conditions. That's why there's a shortage. There's a shortage because of the conditions in which the workers are working, and if we're hiring them at 2/3 the price for what we paid before for a company where we went through a labor action, we're sure to be facing problems again in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Sir?
Hello, my name is Darren Hagen. I live at 140 East Market. My 7-year-old attends Chancellor Livingston. He's on Route 8. I'd like to thank everyone here for making it clear that you are aware of the gravity, the profound gravity of your responsibility for the safety of our children. You've made that very clear, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to hear the due diligence that you have described. I appreciate hearing how hard it was to do this. I'd also like to leave to other parents an opportunity, perhaps my wife will, perhaps somebody else will, to enumerate the many instances where this company has failed us every day in our case. I am angry. I feel personally betrayed by the school district at this moment. My children were put in danger. My 7-year-old was put on a moving vehicle driven by somebody I didn't know to be deposited at my home and taken from my home at times that were unclear to me. This is not a public relations problem. This is a betrayal of faith. And this is a really, really big problem. I really want to impress upon the trustees, the president, the superintendent, that there are a lot of people who are very, very angry and are more than happy to be mobilized on this issue. It has to be fixed. Working it out on our children is unacceptable. I understand, I've heard very clearly the justification for the failure, but it was a failure. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
My name is Jean Stark. I'm at 1237 Center Road, out in Clinton. My children, I have 3 children in the district currently. 2 are one in the high school, 1 in the middle school, 1 in the elementary. Bus 3 was a complete failure the first week. They never showed up. I had to drive them. Then the following Tuesday, when they did finally show up, they were picking up my children on the wrong side of the road.
I went to school with Mr. Walker. He was one of my teachers. And he knows a child was killed in Red Hook schools crossing a road. And currently in Red Hook schools, it is against their policy to ever let a child cross the road because she died. She got hit by a car. Whether a bus driver told her to go across or not, she died. I believe she was 7, 8 years old. For as long as my children have gone to this school district, they have never, ever crossed the road. These bus drivers have always picked up my children on the same side of the road and dropped them off on the same side of the road. Center Road is a 45-mile-an-hour zone that no one single person, except for me, goes 45. These people go 55, 60 miles an hour. There are trucks going down to the quarry on Salt Plain Turnpike, and they're going into the town hall, and I hear them at 5 a.m. screeching to a halt and trying to downshift. That's what wakes me up in the morning, not my alarm to get my kids on the bus. Right now, my kids are being picked up at 6:40, not 6:44 in the morning. And pretty soon, when the time changes, it will be pitch black on that road. It took me running into the elementary school, screaming and crying, and refusing to send my children to school if they were not picked up on the right side of the road. And I still hear that there are children in this district who are crossing Slate Quarry Road and Center Road. Slate Quarry Road, that's insane. I'm sorry, that's absolutely crazy. I don't think any of you have any idea, well, you live out there. I don't think anyone has any idea how fast these people go. It doesn't matter what the speed is. To think that on a blind curve you're going to allow our children to cross the road. And I fear that the only way that this policy will change in this school is if one of our children gets killed. Because that's what happened at Red Hook. It took a child dying to go ahead and make people realize that they should have walked the routes. They should have driven them. They should have seen where these people are picking up children. And by the way, there are still children not being picked up at all. I'm part of the Rhinebeck moms group, mom and dad's group on Facebook, and there are still moms complaining and dads complaining that these children are not being picked up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Piper Woods. I'm at 22 Winston Drive. My kids are on bus 6. I actually have a bunch of questions. I thought I could just kind of rattle off my questions, and then later you could either answer them or at least think about looking into them. One of the concerns I have is, or that I heard right now that you were, I think Tom was talking about, was that you're maximizing the number of kids on the bus so that you can increase state aid. And I guess that, I assume then you had to increase like the geographic areas to maximize the number of kids on the bus. Right now, last year my kids were getting, I have no qualms with our bus driver. He drove it last year. I'm thankful that we have a returning bus driver. The bus driver, last year we used to get picked up at 8:25, and this year we get picked up at 8 o'clock. So that means my kids are on the bus for 45 to 50 minutes. The last probably day to 2 days, I've actually been dropping my kids off at school just because I'm interested in knowing what time the bus actually arrives. I usually beat, the bus driver to school, and typically the bus doesn't usually, I know the last couple of days this has been an improvement, but when my kids are on the bus for 15 minutes and we're 8 minutes away, it's concerning to me. I would hope that you guys would look into maybe I guess, adding drivers or adding routes, because it just is a really long time. I have a kindergartner and a third grader. The other things I have questions about were I'm interested in knowing what steps specifically that you have set up with the bus company and what deadlines for those specific steps, whether it's safety issues or routes or drivers, number of drivers. I'm interested in knowing those specifics and the deadlines that you've provided them. And if they don't meet those deadlines, what options basically does the school district have? I'd like to know the other districts that contracted with Always East, if they're having problems. Are they the similar problems that we're having? And is there any way, are you working with the other districts, to help solve some of these problems? I did look online at the budget last year, so I had a confusion about, you're saying it's 2/3 less. It looks like from last school year to this school year, the budget or the approved budget was $30,000 for the transportation compared to last year, an increase of $30,000. So I was wondering if you're saying it's 2/3 of, I guess, what was improved. It's $1.5 million, $27,000 for the current. And I'm really, obviously I'm interested in solving these issues now, but I'm also interested in what's going to happen next year. Is the board looking at doing a recent comparison of what it actually costs to have your own system versus subbing it out to another contractor, and really what the difference in cost is?
Excuse me, do you mean the difference between contracting versus purchasing our own and maintaining our own buses? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand your question.
I know that this district is a small district in comparison to other districts that have their own. And I know I talked with Tom a couple days ago, and he said one of the other issues was that the town of Rhinebeck doesn't allow bus storage or something like that, as a zoning issue. So, I'm just sort of curious what the obstacles are. I think that's it. I appreciate, all of your efforts, and I hope that there are improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, ma'am?
My name is Gilda Lyons. I live at 140 East Market Street. My son Atticus is in 2nd grade, and he has been riding the bus since the very first day of kindergarten until last week, when we had to pull him off the bus. On the first day, we live on the blind turn where Market Street starts, and now Atticus is required to cross the street to get on the bus. So from the very first day, we hear and we smell the rubber of the cars coming around the blind turn and having to stop very short. The first day, we waved down the bus, who had gone by our house a number of times. And the driver actually went from 35 to nothing in about 20 yards. There were skid marks outside of our home. The next day, when Atticus was to be dropped off, the driver went by our home so many times that our son, who is a strong, independent, and confident young man, was in tears. He said, "Mama, I didn't know if I was going to get home." The fear was real. And that night, he woke himself up from a dead sleep to say, I'm so glad I know our address is 140 East Market Street. I know I'll be able to get home. This is a boy who loves school. And he loves riding the bus to school and home. And these are fears that come right into our home. The last day, we live in the village. The last day that he rode the bus, it was 9:15, and the bus hadn't come for him yet. And when it did come, it was going the other direction. It was mismarked, which it had been since the first day. The numbers never coincided with what we were supposed to be putting him on. Bus 8, oh, it's bus 14. Oh, it's bus 11. It was never in sync with the information we had. And there was a new driver, as there was every day, a new driver on the route. And a consultant this time, someone directing her. So we said, it's 40 minutes late, so now we're putting our son on the bus with you. We put him on, we stepped back, and we realized he was the only one on the bus, 40 minutes late. So my husband and I, in a panic, realized we just put on our son on a bus driven by people we don't know, going the wrong direction and mismarked. And that was the last time our son went on the bus. And it's the last time he'll go on the bus until we get some assurance that this is solved. And my concern is that, I have a number of friends that we've made through our children being in this wonderful district who couldn't be here tonight because they've got kids and they couldn't leave home. But somebody's kid was dropped off at the wrong house, and she said, well, she was a good friend, so that was a relief. But dropped off at the wrong house? How is that? How is this not? How are these comprehensive failures not breach of contract? I do not feel safe with this company, and I would need to see some evidence that the weight of these failings is being felt. I understand the job is hard, but this is dangerous and scary for all of us. My concern is that because the failings have been so comprehensive, I can't trust the company until we've been assured somehow that the situation has been fundamentally shifted somehow. And my other concern is that so many parents have given up on the bus and are now driving their kids to school that any progress that's been made in settling down these new routes, any progress is really make-believe because we just gave up. Thank you.
Sir?
Hi, my name is CJ DeGennaro. I live at 5 Morton Road in Rhinecliff. Just to expand on the previous speaker, we've started driving our kid to school, picking him up from school, primarily because the bus has somewhat become rendered useless for us at this point. In previous years, the bus route sort of reversed in one direction. In other words, the bus would come a long way to pick him up and a short way to drop him off. I don't know if that was sort of a failing on the planning of the route itself by the bus company, or if it was a conscious decision that was made, but in all, my son spends 46 extra minutes on the bus each day, totaling about 96 minutes a day. As a result, my work days got short. We have to make compromises, so I think any money saved by the district on the downsizing of the bus routes and it comes out at the expense of us, as well as other families who are, like the previous speaker said, electing to drop their kids off. So I have to agree with the previous speaker that some of the improvements that you might be seeing are at our expense. And I think that is somewhat unfair. My son, before going to kindergarten, he's always had an obsession with trucks, and he always called the bus the big yellow truck. At this point, he is tired when he gets home, when he takes the bus home. He's visually just exhausted. He, at this point, doesn't really feel like taking the big yellow truck home. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Amy Pelletier-Clark. I live at 197 Salisbury Turnpike. And I wasn't going to speak tonight. I really came here because I too have had things where we pulled my brand new kindergartner off the bus. And I'm sure many parents here can attest to the feeling of watching your baby get on a bus and go to kindergarten. Well, I was a wreck to begin with. And the bus situation was horrible for us. It made us pull him off of the bus, but most importantly, it's shaken my confidence in the whole school experience as to what's going on. My son doesn't get it. He got on the wrong bus. The right bus pulled up behind him and said, "Oh, that man's doing the wrong route. I don't know why you would put him on that bus." But that was our third different bus, so we had no idea who was who at that point. He doesn't get it. He just knows that he's been taken off the bus. But as a parent, I am really shaken by this experience, and I reached out to Sue McCormick. I wrote an email to Mr. Palin. We wrote a letter into the school, and not once have I heard anything from anyone. And I think that has really kind of got us really worried also, is that the communication and the emails have been great, but I just need a little hand-holding during this whole experience of watching my son go to kindergarten. And coming here tonight, I was really hoping to hear how we as parents were going to get our hands held, and I'm not walking away with that. And I'm not going to be putting my son on the bus like many of the other parents until I have some more assurance as to how things are going to change and what next year is going to look like. As I've told him, I don't know if you're going to go on the bus this year. And my son too loves the bus, the big trucks, he wants on that. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to look, and I'm sure there are many questions out there. I just really wanted to get that sense of how, as a parent and a first-time school parent, I'm not feeling very good about any of this. Thank you.
Mike, I saw your hand up.
My name is Michael Damp. I live at 65 Longview Road in Clinton Corners. I have 2 elementary school students and a high school student. I'd like to thank the board, first of all, because I made a lot of phone calls over the last few days, and those members of the board that I did talk to, or at least leave messages for, were able to get back to me, and I think that they voiced some of my concerns here tonight. But I have a few questions about some of the things that were said tonight, and a few issues that I'd like to at least go on record in saying, and that's that the very first 7 weeks is a long time, I think. I know it's a short time compared to what you're used to dealing with a new company, but 7 weeks is a long time to iron a lot of things out. And the first opportunity that I had when I recognized that something was wrong was a week before school started, and that's when I received my letter with my pickup time. And that's, as soon as I opened the letter, is when I began to address the issue. And I called the school district, talked to Sue McCormick, told her my concerns with living on Longview Road and having an 8:40 pickup time was just not feasible to get to the elementary school. It just wasn't, it's just not, it's impossible, even if my students were the last ones to get picked up, impossible. So she told me she would get back to me with an answer. So I waited, called, left a couple messages, no return phone calls. On Tuesday, the day before school, while traveling to South Carolina, I make another final phone call to the school district. Finally get a hold of Sue, who tells me that, oh yes, your time has been changed to 8:20. Now, of course, I hadn't gotten any notice of that, so had I not made that phone call, we would have walked outside with the prescribed 10 minutes early, because things don't always shake out right on the first day, and we would have missed the bus, assuming that the bus came at 8:20, which was the adjusted time. It didn't come till 8:44. So I have some real questions as to whether that adjusted time of 8:20 was really even accurate. I mean, they came 4 minutes after the time that the letter said it would be. So needless to say, 8:44, my children are out there late. So I think that lack of communication, and it was touched on today that there were two separate things that were mentioned that are contradictory, and that's that they were overwhelmed, the transportation people were overwhelmed with the number of issues, but then within 30 seconds, a minute of that statement was, well, there was only a few parents, a few children that had issues. So was it overwhelming, or was there only a few that were affected? I'm not really sure. And forgive me for jumping around, but when the formula was mentioned about state aid, if you get state aid for children that are 3 miles away and none for 3 miles, does it matter whether 100% of the bus has kids that are 3 miles away and none of the kids on this bus are getting aid, or whether it's 50% on both buses? Same amount of money either way. So
no, it's a lot different than that.
I don't understand.
It's much different than that. Yeah.
But certainly the way it was explained to me, it doesn't seem to make any sense. If you're getting aid, you're getting aid. So it shouldn't matter whether 100% on one bus or 50% on one bus. If that could be explained. And as far as the bid being awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, I think was the language, which I think is kind of ironic that responsible would be in there in this situation. But what specifications are given in that bid? Is there a reasonable time clause in there that a student is on the bus? I know that there's no law, at least that I could find, that defines a specific time, but I know that in some cases there is a reasonable expectation, a reasonable time period that a student's supposed to be on the bus. So clearly there have been issues and there have been extended times, but even beyond that, if we go with the times that were actually issued, my students are on the bus for half an hour longer than they would have been last year at drop-off. So they got off the bus at 3:50, now they're supposed to get off at 4:20. So at 3:50 is a long bus ride for an elementary school child. 4:20 is even more concerning to me. So I'd like to know if those times were given to the bidders. Were they bidding
No,
with a...
No, they're not bidding for time.
So they
no.
give a price, but your student could be on the bus for 2 hours, and that's not a concern for the district, or it is a concern for the district?
Well, it is a concern for us, is what's reasonable, no doubt about that. I guess there's a question of what reasonable is, and I can't answer that right now, but it was to keep them under an hour. When the bus, what we do is basically, what we ask them is how many buses we need and for how many hours. And this was done at all buses for 5 hours. You can bid in many different ways. I've seen 2, 3, 4, or 5 half-hour increments, but it was suggested that we just do the buses for 5 hours. That way we have full use for them to do the 2 morning runs and the 2 afternoon runs. That would basically be a 5-hour slot. Sometimes it can be 4 hours and 45 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, but it starts from the first pickup in the morning for the first pickup of the high school, middle school student, from that first pickup to the drop-off at Chancellor in the morning. That's the block of time. Basically, they got 2.5 hours to do that, and then in the afternoon, they have 2.5 hours from the time they leave here to the last drop-off of a Chancellor student. So it went out there as 5-hour buses. But the routing itself that's a school district. The bus company does not route them. That's the school district's initiative to do that.
Okay. And just if you mentioned that the high school bus run went from 13 to 11, I believe, did the elementary school drop the same, more, less?
They're down to 9 routes.
Down from 13?
No, they didn't have 13. They only had 11. No, I had 12, I think, last year.
12 down to 9, okay. And then, was there any communication or, I mean, I would think that there should have been communication to the teachers as well, because in my son's case, he has geometry first period. He's arriving to school at his best day was 20 minutes late. So he's arriving to geometry 20 minutes late. By then, the teacher has already done the entire lesson plan, wrote all the notes, and explained the notes as they're writing them. But when he arrives, all he has to do, his time to do, is really copy them down as he's trying to pay attention to where the teacher is then, 20 minutes ahead. So, you know, you lose 9 days in a core class like math is pretty significant. And I don't know if there was that was a concern of anybody's to maybe tell these teachers you're going to have a lot, you know, several students arriving late. Maybe not several, maybe one, maybe my son was the only one. Obviously, we're not all here tonight because it was my son who was the only one, but there had to be enough of them that I would think would be an impact and that a teacher would notice. Maybe we need to do something different. I don't know if it's affected him. I hope it hasn't. You know, we've done our part at home with helping him through geometry, but he obviously needed help, and he shouldn't have needed help because he should have been able to master. He's not, doesn't usually have trouble with math, so I don't know if those were things that were thought about.
Well, I mean, the teachers were aware of the problems that we were having with transportation.
Well, yeah,
I mean, they knew what was going on. I'm not sure if I hate to put these gentlemen on the spot, but I'm not sure that any of the principals gave their teachers specific directives as to how to deal with kids who came into class X number of minutes late. I know we've not been marking them late, because it's not their fault. We get that, we understand that, but in terms of making up academic time, I mean, I'll be glad to have a conversation with them and see what that situation is, but I don't know that we've made a provision for X number of kids who missed X number of minutes first period to address that deficit, but that's something we can talk about. It's a good point. It's a good point.
It's a good point. Something to think about. That I think, you know, I'm sure that I hope that they have been thought about by other people than me. I'd like to put my trust in that. But we'll see how he does. Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.